I wasn't supposed to see it. The video came late one Thursday night, sent quietly by my aunt after a strained family gathering in Albuquerque. In the grainy clip, my parents and younger sister were seated around the old oak table in our childhood home, bathed in the soft glow of kitchen light, sipping wine and tearing into me like I was a broken appliance they couldn't return. Rachel only helps because she feels guilty, my mother said sharply. We raised her. She owes us. A pause. Then my sister Brianna's mocking laugh. She acts like she's some big shot covering the mortgage. What a saint! And worst of all, my father, once my protector, now barely recognizable, offered only a silent, slow nod. My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 32, a software systems director in Denver. And for the last 4 years, I've been quietly paying the bulk of my parents' mortgage, more than $5,000 a month, through a limited liability company I created just for this purpose. On paper, they were still making payments, but behind the scenes, I made sure the house they loved, the only stability they had left after my father's business collapsed, didn't slip through their fingers. I thought I was doing the right thing. I paused the video and stared at the screen, numb. The laughter, the casual cruelty, the sense that I had never been more than a tool to them. It was all there, unfiltered, undeniable. And suddenly, the silence I'd accepted for years felt suffocating. I pulled out the mortgage file. My financial advisor, Nancy, had insisted on one clause when we set up the LLC. If they defaulted, I could take ownership. I'd never intended to use it. But after seeing that video, after hearing them call me a burden, I began to wonder. For years, I'd let them believe I was their safety net because I loved them. But maybe all I had been was convenient. I picked up the phone and sent a short text to Nancy. We may need to revisit the purchase clause. I'm done being their invisible benefactor. The next payment was due in 16 days. And for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't sure they'd get help making it. So many of us give, quietly, faithfully, believing that love and loyalty will eventually be returned in kind. But what happens when we discover that our sacrifices were never seen as love, only obligation? How many silent givers out there have been mistaken for fools? At what point do we stop honoring the idea of family and start protecting the dignity we've earned? The morning after watching that video, I didn't cry. I didn't yell or break anything. I just opened my laptop, logged into my accounting software, and stared at 4 years' worth of cold, undeniable numbers. I had covered $267,843 of my parents' mortgage through my company, Clear Horizon LLC. They, in turn, had only contributed a total of $52,500. The math wasn't just lopsided, it was damning. The silence of my condo in Santa Fe felt like the aftermath of a storm I hadn't realized was brewing for years. Then came the second blow. My Aunt Carol sent me a series of screenshots from a family group chat I'd never even known existed. Titled Family Finance Plans, the name alone stung. But the messages? They carved deeper wounds than I expected. Rachel thinks she's some tech queen just because she has money, my sister Brianna wrote. She acts like she's carrying the whole family. What a joke, my mom replied. And then came the knife in the back. We should ask for more. She's single, no kids. What else does she need the money for? Reading those words, I felt a shift inside me. Something sharp and final. They didn't just misunderstand me. They resented me. They didn't just take my help. They twisted it into something shameful. As if I was trying to flaunt success I'd bled for. I reopened the contract from 4 years ago, the one my advisor Nancy had drawn up. Clear Horizon LLC held the deed. The mortgage ran through us. The contract included a quiet clause that had seemed like harmless legal padding at the time. If they missed a payment, the LLC could execute a purchase transfer, meaning the house would become mine, fully and legally, and they'd become month-to-month tenants. It had always just been a backup. Now it looked like a doorway. I clicked into our payment dashboard. The next installment was due in 11 days. Normally, I'd cover whatever their small transfer didn't. But this time, I wouldn't. For the first time in years, they would need to pay their full share and learn who they were really dealing with. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. Her tone was syrupy sweet. "Sweetheart, can you come to Sunday dinner? We need to talk about something important." The same script, the same setup. I already knew what it was. They were preparing to ask for more money. They probably thought they were being subtle. But thanks to Carol, I had the entire playbook already. I forced a calm smile, even though she couldn't see me. "Sure, Mom, I'll be there." After hanging up, I texted Nancy, "Don't process the buffer payment this month. Let's see what happens if they come up short." She replied in under a minute. "Understood. I'll get the documents ready in case they default. Want me to draft a rent agreement too?" I stared at the message. Rent agreement. For my own parents. My own sister. "Yes," I typed. It's time they learned I wasn't just the backup plan. Because some lessons can't be taught gently. Sunday arrived, and with it came the performance I'd been invited to watch. The carefully staged, emotionally dressed-up dinner that was meant to manipulate me into giving more. I pulled into the driveway of the adobe-style home in the quiet suburbs of Rio Rancho, New Mexico. The same house I'd been secretly helping pay for, without thanks, without acknowledgement, and now, without respect. The front door opened before I even reached the porch. My mother appeared, dressed in her favorite sweater set in pearls, wearing the same polite smile she used on church ladies and unsuspecting neighbors. "Rachel, honey, you made it!" she beamed, wrapping me in a quick, fragrant hug. Her perfume, Chanel number 5, felt weaponized. The house looked exactly as I remembered it. Cozy lighting, family photos perfectly arranged along the hallway. The smell of her signature chicken pot pie floated from the kitchen like some kind of emotional bait. I followed her into the dining room, where Brianna was already seated, flipping through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. My father stood near the window, reading over something I instantly recognized as a bank statement. Everything was in place. "Hope you brought your appetite," my mom said cheerfully, setting the last dish on the table. "We've got a lot to talk about." No doubt, I thought. We sat down, exchanged the usual pleasantries, and filled our plates. I kept my face neutral, nodding, smiling when appropriate. My heart was steady. I had rehearsed for this moment 100 times in my mind. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "So, Rachel, we've been meaning to discuss something important." "Here it comes." "You know the real estate market's been brutal lately," he continued. "Business hasn't bounced back like we'd hoped." "And keeping up with the mortgage," my mother chimed in, "has become, well, it's taken a toll." I took a bite of the pot pie. Perfectly flaky crust, butter hiding betrayal. "We're so proud of how well you've done in your field," she added, reaching across the table to pat my hand. "Software design, right?" "Software systems," I corrected automatically. "Right," she nodded. "Anyway, we were thinking, maybe you could help out a little more each month, just until things get better." Brianna finally looked up. "Yeah, I mean, it's not like you have kids or a mortgage of your own. You've got room." They had no idea. No idea they were talking to the legal owner of the very house they were sitting in. No idea that the moment they failed to pay the next installment, everything they took for granted would belong to me. Not just on paper, but in practice. "How much more are you thinking?" I asked, keeping my tone as casual as I could. "2,000 a month," my father said quickly. "It would really take the pressure off." "Just until we get back on our feet," my mother added. I nodded slowly. "I'll have to think about it." Their faces flickered with something they tried to hide. Panic, impatience, maybe both. "Is something wrong?" my father asked. "No," I said, sipping my water. "I'm just trying to be careful with money. That's good business sense, right?" Brianna scoffed. "Some of us don't have that luxury." I turned my gaze to her. Then some of us should probably be more careful about what they say in private chats. Her face blanched, but she said nothing. After dessert, I excused myself to use the restroom. Instead, I veered toward my father's study. The door was ajar. Their voices carried. "She's not going to budge," Brianna said, her tone sharp. "She will," my father replied. "If not, we'll remind her of that college loan, the one from my business account." "That was years ago," my mom said, "and we can always contact her company. Suggest she's mentally unwell, that she's misusing funds. That'll scare her." I froze. Every word stabbed deeper than the last. They were ready to ruin me. They weren't family. They were opportunists playing dress-up. I stepped away, heart pounding but mind clear. They had pushed too far. They weren't asking for help. They were demanding control. Back at the dinner table, I grabbed my purse and offered a final smile. "You'll have your answer in exactly 7 days." "Why so specific?" my father asked, narrowing his eyes. "Because that's how long you have before your next mortgage payment is due," I said gently. "You may want to make sure it clears." I kissed my mother's cheek and walked out, leaving behind the scent of pot pie, fake concern, and decades of misplaced loyalty. The countdown had begun. I'd been betrayed in silence before, but hearing them plan my destruction with such ease, such calculation, turned something inside me cold. That night, after leaving my parents' house, I couldn't sleep. Their voices echoed in my mind. My father calmly proposing blackmail, my sister mocking me like I was disposable, and worst of all, my mother suggesting they smear my mental health to my employer. Not one of them hesitated. Not one considered the cost of what they were suggesting. I spent the next morning reviewing everything with Nancy, my advisor. "They mentioned digging through my files," I told her. "I think they found something in my cloud account when I visited last month. I logged into my work drive using their Wi-Fi. My system must have auto-synced." Nancy's face darkened. "If they accessed your cloud files and plan to use that against you, we need to move fast." We documented everything. Screenshots of the group chat, the original video from Aunt Carol, the audio recording I captured from the study door. Everything was sorted, time-stamped, and archived securely. "I also want to notify my company's HR," I said. "I want a record on file before they try anything." Nancy nodded. "That's smart. Preempt the attack." By that afternoon, I had drafted a professional report outlining the threats, including evidence of their intent to harm my career with false claims. I didn't accuse them of hacking, just of boundary violations and manipulation. I asked that any suspicious contact from my family be flagged and forwarded to me. The HR rep thanked me for the heads up and noted my file. The next day, my parents resumed their campaign. Text after text. One guilt trip after another. My mom messaged things like, "Sweetheart, don't let money come between us. We're family. Your dad's blood pressure has been so high from all this stress. We sacrificed so much for you, Rachel. Can't you give just a little more?" It was always the same rhythm: pressure, pity, manipulation, like clockwork. But then Thomas texted, "Heard some layoffs are happening in your industry. You okay? Might be nice having a family to fall back on." It was so thinly veiled I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I screenshotted it and added it to my growing file. Nancy called that evening. "They're going to default." "How do you know?" "The bank processed a partial payment from them this morning, but it bounced. Their account's already overdrawn." I stared at the ceiling, my throat dry. "So they're out of time?" "They have until Monday at 9 a.m. If the payment doesn't clear by then, Clear Horizon can execute the purchase clause. The house becomes yours legally, and you'll have the right to reclassify them as tenants." I swallowed hard. I had dreamed of them understanding my value, not fearing my power. But they'd made their choice. Later that night, as I was making tea, my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from my mother. Her voice was quivering, but not with remorse, with strategy. "Rachel, please. You're tearing this family apart. What would Grandma think? This is your home, too. You'd be nothing without us. Don't forget where you came from. I deleted it without replying. They wanted to weaponize history, weaponize blood, weaponize every childhood moment they'd ever held over my head. But that power was gone. I wasn't a scared teenager anymore, desperate for praise. I was a grown woman who had funded their comfort while they mocked her behind closed doors. And now, they were about to feel what life looked like without my support. On Sunday afternoon, I met with Nancy one last time before the deadline. She handed me a folder. All ready. If the payment fails, the property will transfer by 10 a.m. We've got eviction notices prepped too, just in case. I nodded, still absorbing the surreal reality of it all. Do you think they'll go quietly? Nancy raised an eyebrow. Have they ever done anything quietly? I smirked. The calm before the storm was strange. I didn't feel victorious. I felt resolute. There was no joy in this, only necessity. They taught me to suppress myself for the sake of family. But all I had ever done was delay the inevitable, the moment I'd stopped choosing silence over self-respect. Tomorrow, they would find out just how much I'd grown. Monday morning arrived, crisp and quiet. But for my family, the silence wouldn't last. At exactly 9 a.m., Clear Horizon LLC's automated system sent out its first-ever default notice. The payment hadn't been completed. No last-minute miracles. No desperate attempt to pull through. They were officially in breach. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice came through frantically, like a dam had broken. Rachel, something's wrong with the mortgage. The bank's saying we defaulted. That can't be right. Can you call someone? Fix this? I took a steady breath. Mom, it's not the bank you need to speak to. The mortgage hasn't belonged to a bank in 4 years. What? She gasped. It belongs to Clear Horizon LLC. My company. I've been covering over $5,000 a month so you could keep that house. And now that you've defaulted, the purchase clause we agreed to is in effect. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then a faint, broken whisper. No. That's not possible. You'll find a formal notice in your email, I said calmly. The deed now reflects the ownership change. Effective immediately, you and Dad are month-to-month tenants. No. No, this is a mistake. Your father will talk to you, she cried. I heard rustling, then his voice took over the call. You ungrateful little… Careful, I cut in. That's no way to speak to your landlord. I ended the call. Within 5 minutes, texts started pouring in. From distant cousins, old family friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years. How could you do this to your parents? Family means forgiveness, Rachel. Don't let money turn you bitter. They didn't know the half of it, and I had no interest in educating them. I deleted every message without responding. That evening, Nancy and I met at her office to finalize the legal filings. As we printed the tenant notices and updated property records, she looked over at me. You sure you want to go through with the eviction notice? Yes, I said. They plan to destroy my job, my reputation. They've treated my help like obligation, not generosity. This isn't revenge, it's boundaries, finally enforced. 2 weeks passed. They didn't leave quietly. My father tried disputing the contract, claiming he was misled. Their attorney demanded renegotiation. Brianna sent a dramatic message claiming I had traumatized the family. But every attempt failed. The paperwork was airtight. They'd signed it all 4 years ago, without reading a word beyond the payment line. Then came the final blow. My company's HR department contacted me. Rachel, we've received a report questioning your mental stability and suggesting you've used company resources for personal gain. It was anonymous, but we traced the contact. Of course. My family's last desperate move. I forwarded the pre-documented threats, screenshots, and timeline. The HR director's response was swift and clear. Thank you for your foresight. We've reviewed the documentation and closed the matter. No further action will be taken, except reporting the source to the appropriate licensing body. Thomas's real estate board received the complaint 2 days later. An ethics investigation was opened. Word spread quickly. A week later, he was suspended from practice pending review. His license would likely be revoked. The man they called the real business mind of the family had just torpedoed his own future. My mother left one final voicemail. Her voice was wet with tears. "How could you humiliate us like this? We're your family." I didn't respond. I was done responding to people who saw my value only when it benefited them. 3 months later, the house stood empty. I walked through its quiet rooms I'd once fought to save for people who never saw me. The kitchen still smelled faintly of rosemary and wood polish. My footsteps echoed off the tile as I passed the dining room table, where they'd planned to bleed me dry. I didn't feel sadness. I felt release. Nancy joined me shortly after, holding a file. "The final legal release is signed. It's officially yours, no strings." I nodded. "List it for sale." She raised an eyebrow. "Any regrets?" "Just one," I said, looking toward the family photo still hanging by the staircase. "That I didn't stop sooner." As we locked the door behind us, I checked my phone. An email had arrived from the Community Foundation Board. My application to fund a nonprofit for victims of family financial abuse had been approved. It was time to turn this house, this wound, into something that could heal others. And that would be the legacy I chose. The sale closed on a crisp Thursday afternoon. I signed the final papers from my small home office in Santa Fe, the same place I had once stared at spreadsheets, second-guessing if I was doing enough for people who would never see me clearly. Now, I was no longer saving anyone. I was building something for myself. Nancy called me that evening. "The wire transfer went through. After taxes and fees, you'll receive just over $420,000 from the sale." I exhaled, not out of excitement, but relief. "Send the first $100,000 directly to the foundation account," I said. "The rest we'll invest under the nonprofit." The Clear Start Foundation became official the following week, a place where people like me, people who had been financially exploited by their own families, could find guidance, support, and a way out. Our first focus: women in their 30s and 40s who had been treated as emotional ATMs for parents, siblings, or spouses. I gave my story anonymously in our first newsletter under the title, "When Family is the Debt." It resonated. Emails poured in from across the country: nurses, teachers, engineers, even a retired firefighter, all with the same heartbreaking theme. I thought I was the only one. For the first time in years, I felt useful not because I was fixing someone else's life, but because I was helping others fix their own. As for my family, they moved into a 2-bedroom rental on the far edge of town. Brianna started a GoFundMe, filled with half-truths and sentimental language about being wrongfully displaced by greed. It raised less than $300. Thomas never recovered from the ethics probe. His real estate license was revoked quietly, and last I heard, he was working at a warehouse outside Albuquerque. My parents? They never apologized. Not once. They sent one final letter through a mutual cousin, typed, formal, and filled with accusations of betrayal. I read it once, then placed it in a box labeled "Lessons, Not Luggage," and never opened it again. A month later, I hosted our first workshop in Santa Fe. 10 women sat in a circle of folding chairs in a modest community center, passing around coffee and Kleenex as we shared stories that all somehow sounded like versions of mine. And I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not because they hadn't hurt me, they had, but because I had stopped waiting for them to understand. I had stopped bleeding for their approval. I had chosen to build something else. As the sun dipped behind the Sangre de Cristo Mountains that evening, I stood by the window of the center and let the quiet settle in my bones. No more secrets. No more guilt. Only peace. They had taught me that family always comes first, but they never said which family. Now I chose mine, carefully, consciously, and with open eyes. And that made all the difference. Rachel's story reminds us of a difficult but essential truth. Love without boundaries can become a form of self-erasure. Many of us, especially in our later years, carry the belief that family must always come first. But what happens when that loyalty is met with manipulation, disrespect, or betrayal? There comes a time in life when protecting your peace must outweigh preserving appearances. Rachel gave quietly and generously, believing her family would value her efforts. Instead, they took advantage of her silence. Her journey is a powerful reminder that being kind does not mean being used. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and even for others, is to stop enabling toxic behavior. This story speaks to older adults who may have spent decades sacrificing for family at the cost of their own well-being. It urges us to ask, at what point does devotion to others become disloyalty to ourselves? Choosing self-respect isn't selfish, it's survival. And it's never too late to reclaim your voice, set firm boundaries, and redefine what family truly means on your terms.